So hi once again, welcome. My name is Mila Gorchakova. I'm part of the IWSC marketing team. It's great to have you all here with us today, and joining us today as our speaker, we have David T Smith, who is,
You hear me now?
yes,
You
we
hear me
can.
now?
Yeah,
Hello
just
everyone.
hi. Just a short introduction on my side, and then I will give the floor to you. So yeah, David is an independent spirits writer and consultant, author of multiple books on spirits, and of course the IWSC Judging Committee member, and our head judge for vodka as well. So vodka is actually a really exciting category at the IWSC, and we've seen over 50% growth in vodka entries in the last 2-3 years. And the diversity has been really mind-blowing, and the quality as well. So we felt that now is really a great moment to talk about vodka trends and also to answer any questions that you all may have about how we judge this category. And David is the best person to do that. So David, the floor is yours.
No, well, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for joining us. Yeah, I mean, vodka. I totally agree. Vodka is a very exciting category. I think it's been very exciting for a very long time, and I'm sure many of you do as well. But now everyone else is starting to catch up, it seems, which is great. And we're seeing various predictions and statistics that after a small dip, perhaps vodka is going to recover, and actually the value for vodka as well is increasing as well. So I mean, we've got a number of different things that we can look at in terms of trends in for vodka. I think one of the big things is that we're seeing more and more vodka produced in countries that weren't traditionally producing vodka. Probably they were producing some kind of spirit, but perhaps not what we would know as vodka today, which is quite exciting. And I know we've got a question kind of to that, so I'll save a little bit and we'll talk a bit about that when we have that question. I think partly with that actually comes a number of different base spirits as well that we're starting to see. But again, we've got a question on that, so I think I'll cover some of that on there. But we are things like rice, actually a lot more rice than we previously did, and different fruits and lots of different exciting things. I think flavored vodka, which once was a bit of a sort of naughty word, as it were, I think that's certainly coming back in an interesting way. We saw a little bit of these, not quite vodkas because they were too low an ABV, sort of flavored spirits, but ultimately they basically were flavored vodkas, but sort of bottled at 30% ABV. I think there's a number of different brands have done those. I think they've met with some success, but it doesn't seem to have caught massively on fire. I don't think, partly because of the pricing and the quality, the quantity of the alcohol that you're getting. So they're about sort of normal vodka prices, but with a much lower ABV. And I don't think that particularly at the moment makes so much as a value sense as a proposition for the consumer. But we are starting to see more what I would say thoughtful, let's put it that way, ways of making flavored vodka. So whereas previously it might have been you'd had your base spirit and you just add some flavor or some essence to it, maybe some color, and that's about it. Nothing wrong with doing that as long as as long as the final product tastes good and is consistent. That can be brilliant as a vodka, and actually not as easy as you might think to do it well. But we're starting to see people do more things like botanical vodkas. So made in a very similar way to gin. So they would have the botanicals in the still and then distill them, but they wouldn't necessarily have juniper in there. It might be more simple. So they might be using something like lemon peel or something like that. So Trash and Treasures, which is kind of an offshoot of Warner's Distillery, which is a gin producer, they've just released a very good lemon vodka that's kind of made in that way. And actually, their one leads me on to the next point, which is these lemon peels that they happen to be using are surplus from when lemons have been juiced. So there's some plant near them where they get a load of lemons in, they juice them for baking and things like that. And then there's all these peels left over, and that's what they're using to make their vodka. So this idea of sustainability in vodka, which is ultimately quite an energy intensive process to make it and make it probably up to 96%. People are looking at other ways that they can increase their sort of environmental credentials, whether that is in terms of the raw materials that they're using to make their vodka, or whether it might be if they're using some sort of flavor or botanical, maybe it's from there. It can be in terms of the packaging and the recyclability of the packaging, both in how easily it is recycled, but probably more importantly and more of a focus on what percentage of their packaging uses recycled material, and involved in that is the weight of glass and things like that, because that all contributes to sort of the energy that's taken to get it from its raw state into the consumer's hand, and then afterwards as well when they dispose of it. Following in on that, I think that because of that, we are seeing quite a lot of vodka producers really embrace sustainability, and actually, you know, some of the products that are being made, they really are on the forefront. So I think in many ways, vodka is on the forefront of environmental sustainability, particularly in a lot of the practices of the actual production and then in the packaging. So it's a good time to mention the IWSC Green Spirits Initiative. This is a separate competition. This is not part of the taste competition, which is mostly what we're talking about today. But if you are a producer, or if you know a producer that is doing something particularly innovative in their production process when it comes to the sustainable side, or something with their packaging, or they've recently changed their packaging or something to make it more sustainable, that's definitely worth a look out there. And then we have, I guess, the question of what are the challenges that vodka face. And I think one of the big challenges is what vodka often faces, which is at the low end of the market. It is seen a little bit as a commodity, in a sort of all vodka tastes the same. And I think that that can be difficult potentially to differentiate other than on price. And that is also increasingly difficult to do these days. I guess that's where potentially, if you have a medal from a reputable awards organization, that can make the difference. You know, if you're certainly, I don't know very much about wine, if I'm looking at, I don't know, 2 Pinot Grigios or something, and they're pretty much the same price, and I go, which one do I want? Well, this one's got a silver from the IWC, and this one's got nothing on there. I'm gonna, you know, opt for that silver one. That's just me personally, because I know nothing about wine. So that's a little anyway, that's a little recap on what's kind of going on with just trying to find where you are now. There you go. So I was looking at my list there. So yeah, so that's kind of just the a rundown. Was that helpful? That was the sort of thing you were looking for, was it? Is that enough?
Well, as an intro, I suppose so. Thank you so much, David. Yeah, just to let you all know, please do submit your questions via the Q&A function that you have at the bottom of your screens. We have received several questions in advance, and we're going to answer those in just a couple of minutes. But yeah, if you have any additional questions in the process about anything related to vodka or the IWSC judging, please go ahead and type in your questions. David, I've actually, I do apologize for the technical issues once again, but I'm not able to share my screen at the moment for you to be able to see the questions that have been submitted. Can you just sort of go through?
Did you want me to, is this a good time to talk about how we specifically at the IWSC judge vodka? Would that
Yes,
be...
I think we can do that first, yeah, and then move on to the questions.
So
yes.
I'll give you the brief sort of overview. So we'll have our panels, which will typically be 3 or 4 individuals, and there'll be when we get judges in, we sort of give them an idea of what's going to be judged in terms of all the category of spirits on the 2 weeks that we judge spirits. And we say, well, if vodka is your expertise, can you tick vodka and let us know your availability on that? So we're looking for people that know about vodka. And this is only my personal view. My personal view, and it's always the first thing I say whenever I'm on a vodka panel, is who drinks vodka for fun? Because that's what I want. That's who we want as judges. We want people that actually, sometimes they go, you know what I fancy tonight? Fancy a vodka straight out of the freezer or on the rocks or something like that. That's because I think then you get the passion of vodka. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, vodka's boring and everything," but it's not. It's not at all. And they're the judges that we want. We want the judges that are really passionate, and we do a pretty good job of getting them, which is great. So that makes life a lot easier. It makes judging a lot easier. So they'll be given a series of flights of vodkas, glasses of vodka that have been sorted based on how you as an entrant would have entered them. Yeah, you know, when you do it all online, there's all the questions and all that, and they're sorted, and they're partly sorted by ABV, and they're partly sorted by grain, or are they grape, or are they wheat, or are they, you know, because the aim is to make sure that every spirit is judged as fairly as possible. And that's kind of, as my job as the head judge for vodka, that's what I want to do, is make sure every single spirit gets a fair shake, whether it is pineapple flavored vodka that's made out of legumes or something like that, or whether it is a straightforward, you know, classic British barley vodka or something like that. Whatever it is, I want to make sure that it's judged fairly. So they'll have a series. Probably you might judge something like 50 to 60 in a day. It does kind of vary, and there'll be different things throughout the day. So you might start off with some of the more neutral flavors, and then move into the actual flavored stuff. So kind of, I look at it as there's unflavored vodka, and then there's flavored vodka. And flavored vodka is your sort of cherry, strawberry, chocolate, bison grass sort of thing. And then unflavored there are the products that are more neutral and more sort of flavorless, but then also you could have unflavored vodka that has a flavor, and that's obviously, it's totally allowed within the regulation. So you know, you could have the character of the base spirit coming through. You know, if you've got a corn vodka and there's some sweetness, if there's a bit of pepperiness, but generally it's very clean from wheat, if there's some creaminess coming through from the barley, then I think that that's fantastic. And actually, the way that we approach vodka now, after kind of refining it for many years, I don't know how many years I've been judging vodka for the IWSC now, but it's probably approached to nearly a decade, maybe. It's getting close. It's getting close. But gradually, we've been refining it, and actually, that's the approach that I take when I give the judges a little pep talk in the morning. Is what the vodkas that you've got here, some of them will be neutral, and they can be brilliant, and they could be a gold because they're neutral, and some of them could have a really great characteristic of the base spirit, and that could be brilliant, and that could be a gold. And sometimes, because I understand that it can be tricky to know exactly the right category of which to put the vodka in, sometimes I said they might be next to each other. So what we want the judges to do is find really good quality products. The judge's job, the judge's job is not to categorize the vodkas, because we've already done that and you've already done that. What we want is them to say it's really good. So we're not looking for, as we have had with other, to be fair, with a different competition, but you know, things where, well, this is too flavoursome to be a neutral vodka, even though it's got no flavour, you know, it's unflavoured. Or people say, well, and the other way around, and we don't really want that. We just want, where's the quality, and we can worry about the category. You can worry about the categorization because you know how you want to sell it. So that's kind of my thinking on that one. And then, as they're being tasted, I have a list of everything that's going to be tasted. It's by blind, of course. I should have said that. Everything's blind. Even I don't know what anything is. And then I can see the different scores coming in. So anything that gets a gold, I will taste to make sure that that's our gold quality. Anything that doesn't get a medal, I will taste to make sure that that's fair, and then hopefully also provide some notes as to why that probably was the case. Because if you don't get a medal, if you don't get any feedback at all, that's not very helpful. And I think that's important, and I think that's important part of the ability to improve year on year. And that is generally what we see. The quality of spirits, not just in vodka, but in gin and a lot of other products, the quality gradually gets better. And I do think part of that is having the feedback of knowing how you can improve. Sometimes it can be very small little twist, little change can make a very big difference. And then also I would be looking out for things where maybe there might be a split in the panel. So maybe 2 people think it's a gold and 2 people think it's a silver, and then I'll be there to kind of facilitate the discussion to kind of see. There we go. So the judges, they judge, they taste it neat on its own, they have a discussion, and then if there's disagreement, then I'll come over, and then I'm just kind of checking in just to make sure that everything's judged just as fairly as possible. And of course, if there's anything that's a little bit unusual or out of the ordinary, perhaps, that I haven't seen before, then I'll make sure I taste that. Partly because I'm really interested to taste it, of course, but partly because we need to make sure it's judged fairly. So.
Thank you so much, David. If I may just add one thing, we do pride ourselves for limiting our tasting samples, the amount of tasting samples that judges get to taste throughout the day. And the maximum, the absolute maximum is 65. It's often less than that.
Yeah.
And we are really one of the few competitions that do that. And the goal of it is to prevent palate fatigue that many judges can get towards the end of the day if they taste too much stuff, but also to allow enough time for panel discussion and to really, study each single entry under the microscope, basically. So it's a really rigorous, super rigorous judging process. That also allows enough time to provide enough feedback for our entrants, as David has already mentioned. You do get a medal, that's great, amazing. Of course, you will get your tasting note, but if you don't, you will get very, useful, constructive feedback from our judges. Not just you didn't get a medal, but why really, and what you need to work on, what you need to improve maybe in the future. So that's really, really helpful as well for many producers.
And on that note, I'm very keen, and particularly for vodka, when you're judging a lot of very nuanced products, because they are unflavored vodkas, I'm very keen for judges to take a break as well. So they might do 15, 20 vodkas and then say, actually, you know what, you're making good progress. Let's have a break for 5 minutes and then come back to it, because it is amazing how much that little 5-minute break can make a difference. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. I think I'm able to share my screen now. Yeah. It's a bad technology day. Yes, brilliant. I should be able to, with the questions that have been submitted previously. There we are. It's doing it, I think. Just so that we can go through them. And just a reminder, if anything else comes up, please do type your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. All right, David, so if you want to go through these ones, please.
Yeah, perfect. So first question is, does the key future value of vodka lie in the use of agricultural waste products as the base material? I think this is important, and it will continue to be important. Whether it will be the key, I'm not sure, but I definitely think that it's something that we will see more going on. Sometimes it can be a waste product. So I have seen people make this is a distillery in Los Angeles that was making vodka from like various bakeries. At the end of the day, they collect all this sort of all the stale bread and donuts and cakes and all this kind of stuff, because there's a lot of starch and then potentially sugar that they would then turn into a vodka. So I've certainly seen that. I've seen sort of waste from some certain like types of orange that were perhaps not good enough to be juiced, or not the quality for the juicing, but could still be fermented. I've seen that from sort of Florida and things like that. I mean, of course, as the people watching will know, you need a huge amount of anything, of the raw material to make whatever you're making your vodka out of. You need a huge amount of it, so you really need to have somewhere where there is a surplus. But I mean, I think that there is definitely something to be said for that. And of course, this was a very established way of storing excess products. You know, this was what a lot of farmers used to do. If they couldn't eat all the things from their orchard, or if whatever they happened to have that was left over, if they had this surplus crop, rather than just letting it rot because you didn't necessarily have the facilities to keep it like you do now, they wouldn't waste it. They would turn it into alcohol, and then it has a different store of wealth, and that was what would happen. So actually, it's quite an old thing, but it's almost being treated as a new thing now. We're seeing a few people work with peas, like garden peas, green peas, and they're using that as their base and fermenting that and then turning that into alcohol. That has a environmental benefit, but it's slightly different. It's to do with the nitrogen that's put back into the soil. So it essentially means that the next thing that you grow in there, which probably wouldn't necessarily be for the vodka, you wouldn't need to use the same sort of nitrogen sort of fertilizers and things, because actually that's already been added back to the soil. So it kind of enriches the soil, which is pretty good. So eat more peas, I guess, is the takeaway from that. And I also think, and this kind of comes into this second question about the New World vodkas and the vodka belt countries, is these newer products need differentiation. Right? So if you're a vodka that's made in the US, I'm talking about if you're doing total grain to glass kind of thing, or Australia or somewhere, or the UK or somewhere like that, you need a point of difference. And so often this aspect of using a different base or having this environmental story that you can tell, this is part of the differentiation. So I think that tends to be, I kind of jumped to the second question now, but it tends to be what we see as a difference between the New World and the sort of old sort of Eastern Europe vodka belt countries, is they'll be very sort of clean, classic grain. Some of them, yes, will have more of the grain characteristics coming through, but we tend to see less of the grape-based vodkas that we might see, or we might see, less of some of these other more unusual bases for vodka. So then you tend to get different sorts of flavors. So actually your vodka, even though it's unflavored, it's had no flavor added to it, it's just from the raw material, it might be more fruity and it might be more floral, and this is all perfectly acceptable. And this is kind of, again, when we're talking to the judges and our expectation from the judges, this is what we need to make sure that they're looking for. Because if you have a grape-based vodka and you are expecting to have a very, very clean wheat vodka, that's a bit of a surprise, but both, if they're executed well, are worthy of high achievement. So
Amazing, thank you.
the person asked that question about the New World vodka and the vodka belt. Did that answer your question? And if it didn't, I can elaborate, but if not, we'll move on.
Well, it answered my question, so whoever asked this question can probably type a message in and say whether they're satisfied with the answer. Yeah, shall we move on to
Yes.
To the next questions?
So the next one is: will vodka trend be clear or turn into more flavors like the old days of Absolute? Good question. Well, I think that we will see a bit more of an appreciation of more flavoursome vodkas. I think that we will see that, and I think, to be fair, we have seen that, and we've seen that in how things vodkas that have been awarded and got the trophies over the last few years at the IWSC that have got the vodka trophies. Yeah, so I think that that's part of it. I mean, it's interesting to see like what the trends have been in vodka and what they might be in the future. I don't, and I may well be wrong, I don't see a move again to the ultra premium, but who knows? Marketing teams change all the time, right? So someone comes in with a new idea, let's do this. But there was a time, again, maybe it was about 10 years ago, so maybe it's time for it to come back, I don't know, where there were like all very high-end vodkas. So all the vodkas did different high-end versions. So like Finlandia did a more expensive version. I know Grey Goose maybe about 5 or 6 years ago did a very fancy one that had some, I want to say it was like some Blanche Armagnac or something, like it was some unaged cognac or grape spirit that was mixed in there. And Smirnoff had done a luxury version. So these are kind of ones that are probably 50-60 pound a bottle. And I mean, you used to have time where there were lots of, where luxury, that was where a lot of things were. But I think there are a few luxury players in the market, and I think they're doing a really good job with it. And I think they've probably got good control on that. So whether other people will go into that area. I'm not sure. It would be interesting. It would be interesting to see what they came up with, but I think at the moment it's probably, particularly with issues with people's finances and stuff, it's going to be a little bit more consolidation and solid in the 30-40 quid a bottle kind of stuff would be my guess. In terms of flavors, I think that we will see more flavors coming out of the market. Some of them will be clear because they've been distilled like a gin would be distilled, so they are clear. There's definitely a question if you're making vodka today, is it better for it to have a color or not? Now, some people say, well, I don't like to add anything. So if that's your mantra, then obviously the answer is no. But if you've got a citrus like a lemon vodka, do you want to have a little sort of straw yellow color to it? Maybe, maybe not. There's always issues with straw colored liquids, but there we go. But you might do. But I think sometimes if you had something that was like cherry or something like that, part of the attraction for some people is the color. And I think if we look at what happened with flavored gin, now of course bearing in mind with gin you've also got to have that juniper in there as well, so there's already that kind of slight tussle, but with vodka you don't, so you can just embrace the flavor. A big thing that was selling flavored gin was the color. If those gins had been clear, people wouldn't have bought it, because what was happening was people would see the big balloon with the ice and the garnish, and it would be some pink liquid or some orange liquid, and people would say, I'll have one of those. And there is the that is the thing that's selling the drinks. It's people will see one, they don't even know what it's called. They just say, I'll have one of those ones. Or they'll say, I was in a bar and they were doing this thing with this and that, and that's how these kind of big trends start. So yeah, I think, I mean, absolutely, they kind of stopped now, but I mean, they were releasing like 1 or 2 a year. So I think that the times where we would have some brands with like a portfolio of sort of 20, I think we might not see that so much, but we might see 10 on the larger cases and maybe 2 or 3 in the smaller ways. I think that there's now, where there wasn't before, an avenue for products that may have previously tried to get away with being called gin to be called vodka, which is probably what they should be called. And I think things like this lemon one, there's a I think what's called on. It's like a pine gin or something like that. Spruce gin. No, Douglas fir. Douglas fir. That's what it is. From Heppel, another good gin maker. And they've gone down the route of this Douglas fir vodka as opposed to calling it a gin. So I think we'll see a bit of that. There we go. What is the future for flavored craft vodka, salty citrus? Yeah, good question. I mean, I talk a bit about this botanical vodka. I mean, that as an idea has been around for a long time, but I think we will see a bit more of that. I think we'll see some gin producers switch in to making more botanical vodkas. I do think that that's something that we will see. Salt, yes. I can see salt seems to be a bit of a thing. We've seen again a lot of it with gin. People adding salt with gin. There are a few with that are in vodka, such as Mermaid's one, which is a very good example. If you're looking to try one, that's a good example. Mermaid's salt vodka is particularly good. Salt works well. It works well in so many mixed drinks. Vodka works so well in mixed drinks. Makes people want to just maybe have a little bit more. And if you think about, if you want to have a vodka martini, if you want to have a Bloody Mary or something like that, that salt's going to work so well with it. So I am genuinely surprised that we haven't seen more salt in vodka. I think we probably will see more of that. That always provides an interesting issue when you're judging. Ideally, and anyone that does enter, do try, if there's a space, for extra notes, do put that in, because it's useful for us to know beforehand. Because what you don't want is a judge that's judging a load of sort of normal vodka, unflavored vodkas, and then they get a salt one, because sometimes salt gets put with flavor and sometimes it gets put not. But I think it's worth disclosing the salt in there. I think you tend to do. I think you tend to do a bit better. But of course, salt is not about it tasting like seawater. Salt can also be just about adjusting some nuances to it as well. Citrus, I think everyone's always going to love citrus vodka. I think it's always going to be there. I think we'll see. Um, an improvement in the quality of citrus vodka, as I've spoken about before. But I also think we will probably see some more interesting citruses. I think we'll move beyond lemon and lime and orange, perhaps, because again, if we look at all these different citruses that are around the world and these different producers that are around the world, and they want to kind of capture some element of where they're producing their vodka, why not use a yuzu or finger limes if you're in Australia or something like that? I think I've not seen it yet, but I think we will do. Okay, and is transparency of vodka production becoming more important, e.g., pure HGO for dilution, charcoal filtering, multi-column distillation? I think transparency is important with vodka. I think that generally things need to go further because I think that it is unclear often whether someone's making the product themselves from grain to glass. So, I mean, they're getting the material in, they're doing the fermentation, and they're doing the distillation, and also what's added after distillation. And there's lots of different things are allowed in different regulations, but actually disclosure of that is it's not fantastic. And I'd like to see more of that. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter how you make it as long as it tastes really good, and that's why I think it would be nice to have a bit more disclosure. But yeah, at the moment, it can be very hard to work out where something's made or how it's made. So if you are a vodka producer and you are up for the disclosure, big thumb, 2 thumbs up from me. That's what I say. Very good indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. We've got several questions that just came in and about 15 to 20 minutes to answer those before our next webinar starts.
Yeah. I see one here.
Yes.
Jakob,
Right.
yeah,
Brilliant.
love this question. Brilliant question. So more premium flavors, yep. Do you see a demand for a Navy strength vodka? Well, I will tell you this. I do like a stronger vodka for certain drinks, like 50%, because generally that's about all you can get. There is very little, unless you're getting into sort of some of the like things closer to like Polish pure strength, some of those sorts of things. There's very little that's at a high ABV. It's not massively easy to get hold of Smirnoff Blue, which is probably the biggest one at 50%. I don't think Absolute do their one anymore. That was 100 proof or 50% ABV. I don't know that, and Stolly used to do one as well. Stolly did a Stolly Blue, and they don't. And I'm not really sure why. So you could, I mean, the idea of it being Navy strength, so 57%, I think is quite fun. I think it's a good bit of marketing. There's no reference really to vodka and the Navy at all. So historically, but why let that get in the way of a good story, right? I think as long as you were clear enough that that it was inspired by it and that you didn't think that people were drinking this vodka on there. But yeah, I mean, and it's daft, isn't it? Because really, it's just putting less water in it. So for something like that, so yeah, I think it would be nice to see something. There are one or two around. Like, there's a couple of British producers. There's someone that does something at 60, but there's not a lot at all. So I personally would like to see a little bit more of that, because it's not just good for certain cocktails, but it's also good for people if they want to make limoncello at home, or they want to make little tinctures and things like that. There's all sorts of things to expect from. Richard, oh yeah, very good question. I should have answered this. Sorry, apologies, I didn't. When judging, what happens if I press answer live? Oh, I don't know.
Don't worry about it. I'll do it.
I'll stop doing that. When
do it.
judging, do you expect a different flavor profile depending on the base? What characteristics would you expect from potato-based vodka in comparison to grain-based? Yeah, that is a really good question, and it can be tricky because we do have, and we do disclose what the base is, but the base is disclosed kind of as as just additional information, as opposed to you need to be looking for this, because in exactly your example, potato is can be very complicated. Sometimes it can be very earthy, but sometimes, and the really good ones have this slightly weird, and I say weird, it's in a very good way, this fruitiness, which I just think is absolutely delightful, and then like a slight beetroot earthiness, just really, really nice. And so when we're talking about the base spirits, and we do talk about it, I say this means that it might really have this flavor profile, but also it might just be that they've produced it, and they've really refined it and they filtered it, and so actually the flavor's not really going to come through. So just because it says potato vodka on it doesn't mean that they all have to taste the same, or they all have to fit a particular template, because that's very much not what the IWSC is about. We don't like putting people in a template or a mold. We want to be open for innovation. But that is why we have to be really picky about the judges that we have, so that they'll understand that. And that's why you have a lead judge that will be able to pick these things out. So definitely, like, potato would be one where I would probably be tasting all of them, because I know there's that much variation and they can be a little bit trickier to understand. Hopefully that's answered the question, but that's pretty much the same for everything else. So just because something says that it's barley but it's not really creamy, that doesn't, if it's still a really good product, then it still scores well. Cool. Yeah. What else we got here? So I've done that one.
So the next one was
Thank you for the comment on that.
Any advice or information on tackling oxidation in naturally infused vodkas?
Not in the 10 minutes that we've got left, I'm afraid. Yeah, I mean,
that's a
I
subject
think
for
one
another
of the
webinar.
yeah, I think one of the considerations, particularly with the color, is having a think about, what you're using. How is that going to be impacted by by UV? I mean, that's really the oxidation will do some of it, UV will do some of it. The main thing I can suggest, at least as the starting point, is having your bottle and putting it in a sunny windowsill, so at least you understand how things change, and then if you're getting questions about that, you can deal with that. But yeah, I would love to answer it, but send me an email. That's fine. We'll chat later. That's fine. Very interesting thing to talk about, but it's a little tricky on time. Had that one. Tony, here we go. Tony, hello. What defines varietal vodka compared to, say, flavored or botanical vodka? Yeah, varietal is tricky, and it's not something that it's not for the IWSC, it's not a term that we give to our judges. They have mostly just unflavored vodka and flavored vodka, and this is part of the process that we've been through. I mean, in order to, this is not an IWSC answer, this is a David T Smith answer, and just because I like to at least give an answer. Generally, varietal, I would argue, would be something that was seen as being more of the raw material flavor was coming through, as opposed to something that was water-like and super neutral. That would be my interpretation of it, but it's not necessarily the most helpful term. It does have some help, but I'm really interested in judging vodka for vodka, and if it's a good spirit, it's a good spirit.